2014. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Barbara Brenner.
Here.
Rud Browne.
Here.
Barry Buchanan.
Here.
Sam Crawford.
Here.
Pete Kremen.
Here.
Ken Mann. Carl Weimer.
Here. If people will stand and join me with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, just a couple of quick announcements. If people will turn their cell phones off or onto silent so we don't hear a lot of weird noises during the meeting, that'd be great. And if you're handing out any paperwork during the open session, you can please give one copy to the clerk, and she'll make sure we get copies. We just came from a committee of the whole meeting where we went through a reorganization of the county council. You'll see some new faces up here. We're glad to welcome two new council members, Barry Buchanan and Rud Browne. And we've reorganized the council, and just a little bit about that. You'll see me sitting in the middle now. I was elected as chair. I will try to do a job as good as Kathy Kirshner did. She was an outstanding chairperson. So I'm trying to fill big shoes there. Ken Mann was elected as vice chair. He's actually out of the country tonight, so we elected him in absentia. Executive pro tem is Pete Kremen. And then we elected our standing committees, too. On Finance and Administrative Services Committee this year will be Rud Browne, Barry Buchanan, and Sam Crawford. Planning and Development Committee will be Rud Browne, Ken Mann, and Barbara Brenner. Public Works, Health and Safety Committee will be Pete Kremen, Ken Mann, and Barbara Brenner. And Natural Resources will be Barry Buchanan, Sam Crawford, and Carl Weimer. And we elected ourselves to a bunch of other committee assignments also. That list will be available probably tomorrow, or you can certainly come up and chat with me afterwards if you want to know who got appointed to any of those. So we're going to move on. The first thing on the agenda is the approval of minutes from three different meetings: a special committee of the whole for November 12, 2013, a regular county council for November 26, 2013, in the regular county council meeting for December 10th, 2013.
I move approval.
It's been moved for approval. Any corrections or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain.
And two abstentions. So it passes with two abstentions, Mr. Browne and Mr. Buchanan. Next thing on our agenda is the open session. This is the open session when audience members will have up to 3 minutes to come up forward and speak to us about whatever you want to this evening. Before beginning, please state your name and your topic of interest, and if your name is something complicated, please spell it so we have it good for the record. You can stand behind the lines, and then either podium will work as you come up, and if people can kind of come up and line up, it moves it along. And thanks for your cooperation, and whoever wants to speak, go first.
Council members, thank you for your time. My name is Bob Seaman. I live in Custer. I've got some handouts for you. If you could pass them down, please. I'm here providing information on the Ferndale school bond. I'm not a member of the school board at all. I'm just a private citizen. I'm do volunteer work there, and all I'm doing is just providing information for everybody. There's a lot of misinformation circulating around, and I just ask community members, just rather than rely entirely on friends and family, possibly giving them some input, just get the facts. We have an open forum tomorrow night. Everybody's welcome at Ferndale High. Any questions anybody has about the bond, please come on down. We'll talk about it. It's a big bond. It's $125 million, and we're going to need everybody's help on it. Our Ferndale schools are in tough shape. We spent a lot of time on the Facilities Advisory Committee reviewing what the needs are before we move forward on a bond. It was very careful. And I just asking for community support. We have on the handouts there's a website. Anything you want to know on the website's available. Any questions anybody has, please feel free. Come to the school board, come to the school facilities. We've got all kind of information for you. In addition, there's a packet I gave you about jobs within our reach. I wanted to bring up something. There's 25,000 unfilled jobs in Washington as a result of the job skills gap, growing to 50,000 by 2017. We need people educated. We need skilled workers. We're always talking about jobs. We need educated people, we need skilled workers, and we need help on the school bond. So, thank you. Anybody needs any information, Ferndale has it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Alterman, Whatcom County. Good evening. I want to welcome everybody back, and I just wanted to speak to the issue on the lawsuit, the funding for pursuing the lawsuit. I want to highly encourage everybody to please keep the funding in place for that. I wasn't here, but I have read and heard that there were some motions made to withdraw the funding for the pursuing the litigation all the way to the state Supreme Court on this. I believe that it's an important issue. There's a great deal at stake for rural property owners who are not on municipal water sewer. If you're reliant upon water and septic systems, there's a lot of science that still needs to be done or put into the books that's actually good science with regards to how wells and septic systems affect watersheds, and to not pursue that would be a grave mistake as your duty and service to Whatcom County rural property owners. There's many, many times where I really feel that government spends a lot of dollars to chase after pennies. I know this is, it's a kind of a quaint, cute little saying, but this is one time where really you can spend pennies to go after some real dollars, because the property shift in values and loss of property values is really important. A lot of people have seen what's happened around the state. They don't want to see it happen in Whatcom County, so please continue pursuing this lawsuit all the way to the Supreme Court as far as you can, because we need to make sure that we have the ability and availability for water on our property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Clothier, a business owner in Bellingham. Some information that I think needs to be taken into consideration while you're going through the appeal process on the future-wise. It's information garnered from UPS, or USGS, and government agencies, groundwater associations. Typical individual domestic well, rural domestic well, uses about 1% of the total water used in the nation. Okay, single-family dwelling uses 200 to 400 gallons of water a day. Of that 200 gallons, 400 gallons a day, 80% of that goes back into the water system via the septic system. So the reality is that domestic house is using about 80 gallons a day. So you develop a piece of property, you take down a couple of dug firs, that takes 400 gallons of water usage out of the system. Put the house in, that 400 gallons of water that firs used is now attributed to the house use. So it's net zero. A well-maintained lawn will absorb more water than a typical native environment will. All that water is going back in the aquifer. One of the things that's really interesting to me is that the brouhaha is all about domestic use out in the county, when in fact Bellingham takes water out of Lake Whatcom, runs through the city, and is dumped off to the ocean. That water net is not then recharged in the aquifers. Nobody seems to be excited about that. We're excited about this minuscule amount of water that being used in the domestic system out in the country. So we're spending, this organization is making spend big bucks to go after pennies of usage. So I have to ask myself, what the heck is FutureWise agenda? Why are they doing this? The 4 people that started this lawsuit all live in Bellingham, not in the county, so they're not affected by what's going on in the county. FutureWise is a Seattle-based organization. Why are they interested? What makes them so much smarter and more dedicated to the
30 seconds, please.
Lost my train of thought temporarily. What makes them more interested in the well-being of Whatcom County, more interested and dedicated than you guys are? So I think that you need to take a consideration that these guys have an agenda that's not necessarily in your best interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Cy Eldred, 317 West Laurel Road. I got two things I want to talk about a little bit tonight. First one to be the water. And I was at a meeting not too long ago with the council, and Mr. Mann said he would like to negotiate rather than litigate. Well, if we don't litigate, we don't have very much leverage to negotiate with. And this little bit of money that I heard that $10,000 or something to continue this appeal, that's pretty trivial. I mean, I hope you guys understand the dollars that's going to be involved in this county if we end up like Skagit County. And I just want to hope you guys will continue to fund this and fight for the rest of us in the county. I mean, some of us have more land than others. We live mostly on ag land. It doesn't affect us very much. But I have a couple parcels that if we don't have that we can drill wells on later, our grandkids aren't going to be able to have a place to live. I just hope that you will consider, keeping this appeal up. And whatever it takes is pretty trivial compared to what it's going to affect the whole county and every taxpayer in the county. Excuse me. The next thing I just want to touch on is moving the county offices from northwest to downtown Bellingham in one of the most congested areas of the town. We've got a nice, beautiful piece of property at northwest. It's serviced by sewer and water. The building is shot. I agree, but let's do it like everybody else. Let's put a new building in the parking lot behind, tear down the old building, get rid of it. But utilize what we have instead of buying more property and taking that off the tax rolls. Let's use the property we've got. And it's so central. I mean, I was a general contractor here all my life. I've been dealing with building and codes all my life. And it had become so easy to go out there. You don't have to worry about parking. Try to find a parking place around here. I'm so old I can't even run those computers. But I think that's going to be one of the biggest mistakes that you could possibly do is move those offices to the engineering department and all those. And if you want to get them all together, put some more out there. I mean, where are the people from the county? You got Linden and Ferndale and Everson. Everybody from the county, that's so central. Coming downtown to that piece of property that we're talking about. It's an old junker building. It's going to have to take all of it brand new. It's going to have to be refurbished, and it's going to cost as much or more. And you're going to have to walk a half a block from the parking lot to get to the building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cy, could you leave your phone number, please? Because I want to talk to you about your second issue there.
All right. Next person.
Or both.
Hi, good evening. Therese Van Ash, 5581 2nd Avenue, Ferndale. Also, welcome all our new council people. What I want to speak to is I have been very concerned about looking at some of the population projections for the county and some of the different cities. And my concern with these is that often the developers want to put multifamily housing into these zones, in order to densify. They're not cross-referencing with the flood zones. And FEMA is in the process of reassessing flood zones all over the country, and they're going to raise insurance rates. My concern with what I keep hearing is we can just mitigate that. Mitigate means raise the building 8 feet. What have you done? You've put multifamily, you've packed more people into a zone of harm. And where are they going to go? They're going to be up on a roof? Do we have the emergency services to get them out? My concern with our particular part of town is that if the Nooksack River Bridge went out, we've got limited ingress and egress out of the community south of Main Street. The flooding usually happens north of Main. But, you know, think about Katrina. Think about these things. And my daughter was in the flood of 2008 on the Cedar River. She lived a mile from the Cedar River. She lost nearly everything she owned in her home. So it's just a big concern that I hope the Planning Commission and the Council's looking at. Make sure we're looking at those flood zones and that people are going to be put in harm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Linda Twitchell with the Building Industry Association. First, regarding the previous speaker, let me note that it's not always the builders, it's often the cities that are urging density in their downtowns. I sat in on the Planning Commission meeting last week where they were talking about the population and employment projections, and Ferndale, for instance, says they are taking flood areas into consideration, so that's a point to discuss with the cities perhaps. I wanted to speak for a moment about the county's appeal of the Growth Management Hearing Board's June 7th decision regarding water resources. We've written you a note about this. We're hearing a lot of our members express concern that if this appeal is dropped eventually, it might lead to the end of being able to drill private wells and limits on use of private wells. This is being represented to us by the people we speak to as the number one issue for people living in rural parts of the county. It's their major concern. If they lose their water, they lose their homes, basically. We have a good example of a guy whose name I'm not going to mention here, but he is in Skagit County. He had bought property through Whidbey Island Bank for $160,000. And when the decision came down recently that you can't drill new wells down there, he now has property with a loan for $160,000 that he can't use. This is the type of thing people are extremely, extremely worried about. I wanted to mention that I learned last week that there is a coalition of 5 groups: the Washington Realtors, the Association of Washington Cities, the Association of Washington Counties, the Farm Bureau, and I believe it's called the Association of Washington Business. I'm not sure of that name. They have formed a coalition and are planning an amicus brief to join the county, coming in on your side on the appeal of this decision. The main concern here, the main issue, is not private wells, but is that the Growth Management Hearings Board is setting itself up to make decisions on quantity and quality of water use locally instead of the Department of Ecology, which has basically said we're in compliance. There's concern about if that changes, what's going to happen or what could happen to private wells. So let me urge you all, even if your constituents are primarily in the city, to please take this very seriously, because this is a number one concern of your people out in the county. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? If there's others, you can come down and get ready.
I'm Debbie Van Beek, and I live in the county. And I usually don't attend any meetings, but because of the buzz that I hear among the people, where these well issues really are taking away the rights of us in the county, it feels like the government is taking the liberty to control people as if people have no common sense of their own. I know that there have to be some rules and regulations, or there are some things that might turn dangerous. But in this situation, it feels like a liberty that is being lost to my children and to my grandchildren. And I do hope you guys take it seriously. The issue of whether or not property can have a house built on it or not built on it, it's like, why isn't the freedom in the hands of the people? It's like we're trying to legislate everything. That really, really bothers me. And I know that there's a lot of other people who just feel like they're not going to listen, they're not going to hear us, they're not going to think about it, and they're not going to change anything. But please, don't let that be in Whatcom County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Congratulations, all of you newly elected and re-elected council members. My name is Ronna Lurch. I live in Everson, Washington. That is in the county. And since I've been in Everson, there have been a couple of times when building had to stop in the city of Everson because we didn't have the capacity to serve water to the people who would have built more houses or developed more houses. So then the sewage system was upgraded and our rates went up and we began to pay more money so that Everson could get a little denser and could have people there. So when people buy property, and I don't care where it is, and I hear people that aren't living in homes but are buying property, they want to build homes for their grandchildren. But when people buy property, they must do so with common sense. They need to know what the water rights are. They need, honestly, that people are buying, speculating on land out in the county, thinking that just pursue this sort of legal thing to get water, when in fact, I think, and I could be very naive here, but my understanding of this very complicated issue is that water has something to do with fish in the river and our rivers. And that is a serious matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, John Sands, Kelly Road, Whatcom County. I just wanted to say that I'd like you to keep up with the lawsuit on this water and represent the people of Whatcom County. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Here comes Patrick.
Oh, it wouldn't be a council night if we didn't get to hear from Patrick.
Would be.
Patrick Allisey, 4825 Alderson Road. I was going to say something nice and cute, like people are so concerned about more progressives, and my feeling is chaos theory will step in and these people will go over to wherever their conscience goes. That's the end of that one.
Yeah.
Water planning is important. I am really pleased that the farmers are uniting a bit. They're always all over the place, want to be independent, but they should be at the table talking about their water rights. Now, I don't think water should be a weapon, it's a resource. Of course, I think each of you know how I feel about putting more people out in the rural areas who aren't farmers. They just run up expenses, and they should be asked to pay for their services. They don't always want to. They want to keep things cheap and get somebody else to pay for their expenses. Now, property rights issues are important. Let me tell you where property rights came from. John Locke. Your ultimate piece of property is your body and your brain. And also, you have a right to the things to sustain it. Water and fresh air. I'll end there.
Thank you.
Very nice.
My name's Kevin Van Beek. I'm from Whatcom County, Custer area. When I was a young guy, I stayed at home instead of moving out, buying a truck, getting payments. Worked hard, saved my money, bought a house. Spent 5 years completely gutting it, re-roofed it, re-sided it, hand shoveled out stumps. Everybody in the Linden area knew who I was, and as they walked by, they watched, because 3 years I sprayed my lawn because I wasn't ready for a lawn. And in Linden, that's a pretty big thing to not have a lawn. But everybody got to see because I was taking down 90-foot tall trees and building sweat equity. Fast forward through 10 years of being in construction and investing in the real estate market, and right as real estate started taking a dive, we got out of having a mortgage and invested the equity that I had achieved in a piece of property in Whatcom County, which you guys are all the representatives that represent me as an owner and all that hard work in Whatcom County. Raw piece of land, but I did my due diligence to study what it would take to drill a well, sewer, were there perk tests, wetland delineation, which is another complete topic that we won't go to. But if this whole thing goes through, there are thousands of stories like mine that this is a fight with me and the people like me over the issue of salmon. Watch a documentary about Alaska where there's no people. There's no people with wells. There's no land galore. They'll tell you how the salmon wait, sometimes for weeks, longer, till the rains come so they can go up and spawn. Salmon aren't helpless. People aren't dumb. And I know you guys aren't dumb, but I know you guys do have the choice with your position to choose your agenda and choose your fights. And I would ask all of you to consider fighting for the people of the county, for all the sweat and work and planning that they have put in and invested into this county, to withdraw from this lawsuit over the idea that wells and septics are somehow causing the complete decline of salmon in this county is pretty ridiculous. And if they want to, the burden of proof
30 seconds,
needs to be
please.
proved before this big of a stick is taken against the citizens of this county. So I'd encourage you to keep up with the fight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen Brown, Whatcom County resident. You've heard a lot tonight about water. You've heard a lot about pursuing the lawsuit. And I just wanted to tell you that I sent out some things. I am the caucus member for the well owners, private well owners for the planning unit. And I would hope that you would continue funding the planning unit when that comes up next month. And it's very important. And we are having a well owners meeting for all well owners in Whatcom County this coming Thursday at the Rum Grange at 7 o'clock. And all well owners are invited. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. Congratulations to the new members, and thanks to everybody for serving on the council. My name is Matthew Goggins. I live here in Bellingham, just down the street on Fraser Street. I don't have any property. I've never owned a well, but based on what I know about the lawsuit and the actions taken by the Growth Management Association, I think it's very important that we protect property rights. And you know, what goes around comes around. You know, I don't have to worry about wells where I live, but I'm sure an overbearing bureaucracy of some sort will try to do something to people in Bellingham at some point. It'd be nice to have unity in the county where one group's set of rights is protected and it's reciprocated when someone else needs help, you know, in a similar situation. But whatever you do, if you decide against funding the lawsuit, please do it on the merits, weighing all the important issues at hand, and you know, which I'm confident you will do to the best of your ability. But don't just assume because it's salmon or water rights or whatever that there's an automatic default assumption that that's the side you should take. But just do it on the merits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Fenton, Whatcom County resident. You know, the people are always talking about the decline of the fish, and a friend of mine runs a tender for Trident Seafoods out of Seattle, but he hauls fish in Alaska in this fishing summer season. And he was bringing the tender down this year to go to Seattle, and they stopped him and sent him into Bellingham Bay, and they loaded the fish on the tender, and they took them north to Ketchikan, Alaska to process them. There were so many fish in Bellingham Bay. But nothing like that ever comes out in the newspaper or not. And he's run tender for years, and they stopped the tender on the way down from Alaska and sent him in here. and said, you got to load fish, and they put a couple new guys on the boat and sent it back because he'd been on all summer. So there's no shortage of fish. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name's Craig Parkinson. I live off Central Road in Whatcom County. My wife and I moved here in 1986, looked for a piece of property and a house to move into, bought a house way bigger than we needed as we moved down from Alaska in the back of a pickup truck, but wanted to raise a family here. Bought a house, and now many, many years later, 2 girls have grown and moved out, and during the meantime, we bought a piece of property next to us with the hopes that one day we would, as we love Whatcom County, we would sell that house and build next to us. Now we have this piece of property, and I hear it's threatened that we may not be able to build on that because we can't put a well in, and that concerns me. We've bought the property. We put a couple acres into a CREP project to protect 10 Mile Creek. Would love to be able to build a well and a smaller house to move into as we get older and retire. And that's it's disappointing to hear that could just dissolve in front of me. So I appreciate that the council would fight for what I have planned for many years to retire and enjoy that property that I've owned all these years. I'm reminded of a cartoon that I once saw, a little 2-frame cartoon where on the left side there's this Russian couple, and Olga, guess what? The government's going to allow us to own this land we use. And on the other side it's Ted and Sally. Sally, guess what? The government's going to let us use this land we own. I would appreciate being able to use the land I own, and appreciate your support in that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. John Strong. I live in the county. I didn't have any intention of speaking when I came here this evening, and I don't have a dog in this fight because I don't have any property, but I was born and raised in Alaska, and I know a little bit about salmon and a little bit about water. And I'd like to suggest to you that this issue has nothing to do with salmon. This issue is about the right to own personal property. That's the right that made this country what it is. That's why people from all over the world came here, because they could own personal property. And of course, it's useless to own property if you can't do anything with it. Secondly, I would suggest that our judicial system is based upon people being considered innocent until proven guilty, and those who suggest that this water situation is responsible for the decline of salmon, I suggest to you that they have an obligation to prove that, because if they don't prove it, it's not true. And I would like to encourage you to listen to real science and base your decisions on fact, and make certain that what you're hearing is factual information.
Thank you. Okay, last call. Anybody else want to speak to us during open session? Thanks for all the good comments this evening. We're going to move on to our regular agenda items. We have only 5 things on the agenda this evening. The first one is a request for approval for the county executive to enter into a contract for services between Whatcom County and Bellingham Food Bank for the provision of collecting and distributing food to local Whatcom County food banks in the amount of $58,000.
I move approval.
Councilmember Kremen has moved approval. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Next is a request approval for the county executive to authorize acceptance of Midwest Employers Stop-Loss policy for insurance protection for the Self-Insured Workers' Compensation Program for 2014.
I'll move approval.
Councilmember Brenner moves approval. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes 6-0. Next one's a request approval for the county executive to enter into a contract between Whatcom County and North Sound Mental Health Administration for Crisis Respite Triage Center and operation of the Rainbow Recovery Center in the amount of $217,789.
Move approval.
Mr. Buchanan has moved approval. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 6-0. Request approval for the county executive to enter into an interlocal agreement between the Whatcom County and City of Bellingham for use of the Plantation rifle range for Bellingham Police Department.
I'll move approval.
Ms. Brenner has moved approval. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That opposed? That passes 6-0. And finally, a request for approval for the county executive to enter into a contract between Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, Division of Emergency Management, and Whatcom State Department of Homeland Security in Snohomish County for the purpose of supporting community preparedness for catastrophic events and terrorism in the amount of $66,764.
Move approval.
Mr. Buchanan has moved approval. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 6-0. We are on to introduction items. We had 4 items on introduction. 2 of them have been removed. So we only have 2 items. Is there a motion to introduce?
I'll move to introduce, but I have a question.
Okay.
I guess it's for the executive. Why was the Slater Road project removed? Okay. Well, I don't want this to hold up the possibility of the Slater Road connector. And so I guess, if we don't have an answer, is there anybody from Public Works here?
I don't see anybody from Public
No?
Works, so I guess we're going to have to
Okay.
trust them that they're not doing anything that's going to hold up a major road project.
Trust but verify.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so there's a motion to accept these introduction items. Any other discussion? Which 2? It's an ordinance amending the Whatcom County Comprehensive Plan and maps to implement changes relating to rural land use planning, and an ordinance amending the 2014 Whatcom County budget. 4th request in the amount of $775,964,000. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 6-0. Other business. Ms. Brenner.
I gave some people copies of this before the meeting, and some of you, if you don't have 2-sided copies, my mistake, and I made some more 2-sided copies because it's supposed to have a backside also. For the last month or 2, we've been getting emails from NACO saying we're one of the timber counties, and we get funding from the federal government, and to keep that federal funding coming because the money, timber, the land itself, most of it is not taxable. So this is something that offsets that and helps with the schools, especially the Mount Baker School District. So it's really important that we send a letter supporting this. I did send an email to the executive a few weeks ago, and he wrote back that he had taken care of it because he had written to them. But I get the distinct impression the more signatures, the better. The more people's signatures on these letters, the better. And I understand that he's the executive. He represents the county, but we all represent the county too. And I'm hoping that council members, there's a copy of kind of a form letter, and there's the policy brief that tells you why this is important to us. And I think the deadline is tomorrow, so I'm hoping other council members will send in. I know Councilmember Kremen already sent something in, but please send something in with your name on it so they have more signatures.
So you're just encouraging us to send individual letters in favor?
Well, I'd like, you want to vote on it? That's fine with me, but even if we vote on it, probably only the people who vote yes would do it, so I'm hoping everybody would vote yes anyway. This is like motherhood and apple pie as far as I'm concerned, but I do think our signatures do matter, and that we just can't say, well, the executive sent something, so that's just fine. it's important. Okay.
All right. Executive Laus.
Just a good opportunity to give the council and the community an update on that. The payment in lieu and taxes called PILT payments represent about $1.5 million a year to Whatcom County government that goes directly into the general fund. Federal government has been contributing to Whatcom County for many years. Instead of getting property taxes on it, we get this payment in lieu of taxes. It didn't make the Appropriations Committee last week. There's been a big push, even as of this morning, to get this attached to the Farm Bill. Had the opportunity to talk with both senators Senator Murray and Cantwell's office this morning, along with Representative Delbenny and Congressman Larson and Congressman Delbenny. So we're heavily engaged in it. I sent a note so that they could use as part of the testimony forward of what the impact would be on Whatcom County if we were not awarded those funds for 2014. Senator, I think it's Baucus, if I'm remembering right, was meeting at 3 o'clock Eastern time today and bringing a lot of the members from the western states together, and they're going to put a big push on this in the next couple days. So it's important to us, but I'd want to assure everybody that we are working on it at this point. Appreciate Councilmembers Kremen's contribution to that also. NACO is working on it diligently, and the Evergreen with Robert Widener is working on it as well. So we're doing everything that we can to make this happen. It's important to us. It has been for a lot of years. And as a border community, to lose $1.5 million at this late in the game on something that we've had for years and years and years would have a detrimental impact, primarily on law enforcement in Whatcom County.
Mr. Crawford.
So Cantwell and Murray are in favor. Are our representatives Larson and Delbenny also in favor of this?
They've signed on.
So I guess I'm wondering what letters we would do now. Would we be writing to other legislators in Washington D.C. that don't support it?
It would be to the leaders. It would be to, well, they're listed here. There are four. It would be for the chair and of the Committee on Appropriations. Barbara Mikulski. It would be Hal Rogers, the Honorable Hal Rogers, Nita Lowry, who's the ranking member on the Committee of Appropriations, and the Honorable Richard Shelby, who's the vice chair on the Committee of Appropriations. And it really, it's a no-brainer that our congressional delegation is going to strongly support reauthorization of PILT. Because Washington State, it's not just Whatcom County, it's a major issue for many or almost all counties in Washington State. But as you all know, there's been a lot of dysfunction in our nation's capital over the last several months, and it's very hard to get anything through. And I think I agree with Councilmember Brenner that in spite of the fact that our executive, and I really appreciate the executive taking the initiative and the effort to, contact our congressional delegation, and I sent a letter about 3 weeks ago to these very important decision makers in our nation's capital. So I think it would help to fortify to some extent our expression of desire to continue PILT, the payment in lieu of taxes. Very important to Whatcom County and Washington State, and I strongly urge all of you to take the effort to send this letter. It's already written, and make sure that it gets distributed to these very influential people.
Mr. Crawford.
Seems to me it would still be more appropriate. Well, we can take whatever initiative each of us is motivated, but I'd like to move that the county council, as a body, send this letter via the chair. And I don't know if you can get it there tomorrow. Tomorrow's when it needs to be there? Is that what I'm?
We can fax it. I have fax numbers for these folks.
So my motion is that the Whatcom County Council sends this letter under our council letterhead as a whole council.
Okay. There's a motion.
And I would second that as well. I was going to suggest the same thing.
Okay. Ms. Brenner.
I'm going to support it, but I still think that doesn't absolve us of individually sending letters. The more people those guys see letters from, the better. And it makes enough of a difference that they're still writing us, NACO is, about getting this done. So it would make a huge difference to this county if this doesn't happen.
All right. Well, there's nothing that precludes individual council members from sending their own letter in. When I track down the fax numbers for these folks, I'll send them out to the whole council so you have those, because if it's really coming up that quick, mailing isn't going to work. Mr. Crawford.
This question is kind of directed to Councilmember Kremen or the executive if he knows, but I know you've had a lot of background on this. Has anyone ever tried to calculate, even if all the forest lands were assessed at a very low rate because they're just forestry, what kind of tax dollars we miss out on because we don't get to collect those tax dollars? I mean, I'm just saying in Whatcom County, has anyone ever tried to figure out? I'll bet you it's more than $1.5 million a year.
Right.
But we don't know what that number is.
I don't think that number's ever been calculated, but it would far exceed the $1.5 million. But as the executive has already expressed, $1.5 million to Whatcom County is extremely important. And as you well know, our criminal justice system gets more than half of our general fund revenue. So it would really impact adversely our criminal justice needs, which are really not even funded to the levels that we'd like to, as it is now. And to lose an additional $1.5 million would be extremely adversely affecting our ability to have a good and solid criminal justice system. So I think I think we ought to do both. I think we ought to do a joint letter, unless there's any objection from any of the members here, and additionally send individual faxes, and we'll get that information from Chair Weimer, and do it all, because as Councilmember Brenner stated, the more correspondence that these individuals see, hopefully we'll get a positive outcome. But all we can do is try, and I think we should.
Councilmember Brenner.
Well, you keep talking about faxing, but if we send individually send emails, they'll get there.
Yeah, if we can track down emails. Sometimes it's hard to find emails that'll get to the right people. But I'll look for that too.
Okay, that'd be good.
Any other discussion on the motion by Mr. Crawford to send a letter in favor of the payment in lieu of taxes program? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, 6-0. Any other business? Reports and other items from council members. We'll start down with you, Mr. Crawford. Nothing. Mr. Kremen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on the esteemed position that you now hold.
Our condolences.
Yeah, our condolences, sympathies. I just want to report that I attended the Legislative Steering Committee meeting in Olympia that is part of the Washington Association of Counties regiment, and it's one of our major efforts that the association does. We met last Thursday, and I just want to report to you some of the important priorities for the Association of Counties. First of all, we heard from several members of the legislature. We heard from the majority leader in the House. We heard from a couple of lobbyists from the cities and the counties, and we also heard from one other individual, and I can't remember who it was, but the priorities, they're saying it's a consensus. There's not much expectation that the legislature this session is going to do much of anything because it's an election year. The political climate in Olympia is pretty polarized. The Senate now is just a working majority for the Republicans, but it actually is a majority for Republicans, and then of course the House is controlled by the Democrats, and you have a Democratic governor, and there's the expectations are very low. That's unfortunate, but I think it's the reality that we all have to face. But nonetheless, the association has come up with some priorities, and they are funding of mental health services. As you well know, we spend a lot of money on mental health services, and that in and of itself creates a huge impact to our criminal justice system, unfortunately, because the state has closed down all the mental health facilities that they used to support. Other priorities include protecting our shared revenues. We can't afford to take an additional cut from what we already have. We've been cut to the bone already. One interesting aspect, and it's yet to be determined, but we want to make sure that the counties receive a significant, meanful portion of the revenues generated by the sales of marijuana. We've already seen in the state of Colorado that the revenue generation from marijuana is exceeding expectations from the supporters of those initiatives. So I think it's wise and prudent for the counties to be making sure that we get a slice of that pie, a significant slice of that pie, because it's the counties that are ultimately going to be responsible. Those are, if any laws that are broken are going to wind up being felonies, and the cities do not have to pay for the criminal justice system for felons. The county pays for, whether they live in Bellingham or they live in Linden or they live in unincorporated Whatcom County. The county picks up the entire tab. Lastly, the counties have expressed a desire to include in their priorities looking at, in the year 2015, because we understand in 2014 there's not much going to happen, but to readdress GMA language. And in concert with that, take up the issue of rural domestic water. And that issue has already been expressed by many members of the public here tonight during open session, and I gave a report to the Legislative Steering Committee about what's happening here in Whatcom County, and I had unanimous support for the counties, or for Whatcom County. Actually, we had unanimous urging that Whatcom County continue the appeal process with the Growth Management Hearings Board. So those are the priorities for the Washington State Association of Counties for 2014.
All right. Ms. Brenner.
I do have something I want to say, but I just can't miss the opportunity to follow up on that by saying the fact that so many other state and national organizations are willing to commit to, put in time and effort with legal staff to help with the appeal. I think it really behooves the county to follow through with it, because if we do, we're going to be saving a lot of money in that we're going to have the best legal minds around working on this with us. So thank you for that. The one thing I wanted to bring up was I attended the annual installation of officers at the Whatcom County Association of Realtors, and they honor certain people in the community, and I was surprised and impressed that the person who was their honored citizen, who's worked on the chat, helping to create affordable housing, all that, was none other than Seth Fleetwood, who used to be on the county council with us and just retired from the Bellingham City Council. And I think that was really neat. And so congratulations to Seth Fleetwood.
All right. The one other item I have, and maybe it should have been other business, I just wanted to let the council members know that, as you probably know, there's been filed an appeal to the Growth Management Hearings Board of our recently passed slaughterhouse ordinance.
What a surprise.
So Councilmember Mann and I have been looking at that, and we've talked with our legal staff slightly, and we're going to be bringing forward a potential interim ordinance, probably for introduction at the next meeting, to tweak that ordinance slightly to try to avoid having to spend any money on that appeal. Anything from Mr. Browne?
So this is not really new business, but I'd just like to take the opportunity to say I'm deeply honoured to have this position, and I look forward to the opportunity to serve 100% of the community over the next 4 years. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I pretty much wanted to say the same thing. It's going to be an honor to work with all of you on the council and Executive Laus and the administration, and certainly foremost to serve the residents of Whatcom County to the best of my capacity. So, again, it's a great honor to be in this position.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? We are adjourned. Thank you for attending.